In the first video, we talked about a common claim by Islam apologists like Dr. Yasir Qadhi, who insist that we compare the number of ISIS fighters to the total amount of Muslims in the world. In that video, we proved how misleading and irrational this argument is, since no army in the history of mankind has ever been able to successfully utilize tens of millions of soldiers. This is one of the reasons that there is a consensus among Sharia scholars that physical jihad is not a universal or individual duty, like praying and fasting, but a collective one. And this means that when a sufficient number of Muslims takes up the task, all other Muslims are exempt from the duty of waging war. So to suggest that ISIS needs, let's say, 20 million soldiers in order to be called Islamic is absolutely absurd. To further prove how misleading Dr. Qadhi's argument was, let's compare a commonly accepted Islamic State from the past and see how many fighters they had. In the first video, we showed you that it's more accurate to compare the amount of soldiers to the population they're actually controlling. That's what we'll do again today. The Ottoman Empire at its peak controlled a population of about 22 million. The estimated number of soldiers historians have come up with varies. So in order to give the apologists for Islam the best possible outcome, let's use the highest estimate. According to Professor Rhodes Murphy's book Ottoman Warfare, the total number of fighters in the year 1609 was about 245,000 after combining both the Sultan's standing army, or Kapakulu, and the largest cavalry departments, including their retainers. Let's follow Dr. Qadhi's advice and do the math. 245,000 divided by 22 million times 100 is 1.1%. So the large military of the Ottoman Empire comprised only 1.1% of the population they were serving, which is only slightly above the percentage of ISIS fighters with regards to their population. And remember, this is the Ottoman Empire during its peak centuries, while ISIS is only in its infancy years. Now that we know how low the percentage of Ottoman soldiers was compared to their own state, just imagine how much lower the percentage is compared to the entire world population of Muslims at that time. And to think that Dr. Yasir Qadhi tried to have us believe that such a low percentage for an Islamic State's army can only mean that it has nothing to do with Islam. In light of this, Dr. Qadhi's reasoning forces him to either begin to call the Ottoman Empire un-Islamic as well, or retract his claim about the ISIS army being too small to be called Islamic. We've emailed him all of this information 2 weeks ago, but haven't received a response yet. Let's look at some other interesting statistics. Since Dr. Qadhi calls the Islamic State's army small, I'm sure he would not say the same about the world's second largest active armed forces. But how large is the United States military compared to its population? Let's do the math. Again, let's be friendly to the Islam apologist and take the highest possible number by adding reservists to the active personnel. 2.1 million in military manpower compared to a population of roughly 321 million equals 0.67%, which is lower than the most conservative estimates regarding the army of ISIS, as we showed in our previous video. And if we only look at active manpower, the percentage drops down even more to only 0.41%. So clearly, the U.S. armed forces have very little to do with the U.S., at least according to Dr. Qadhi's logic. Let's do a quick recap. When Islam apologists present to you the claim that the number of ISIS fighters is low because it's just a fraction of the world population of Muslims, call their bluff. Ask them to explain why this comparison is relevant and then refute them on the following points. 1. ISIS doesn't need all Muslims to fight. 2. ISIS could not handle all Muslims coming to fight. 3. There has never been an active army of tens of millions of soldiers, so to suggest ISIS needs them in order to be called Islamic is very misleading. 4. In Islam, physical jihad is a collective duty, meaning that only a small portion of them is sufficient to fulfill the duty. More than that is simply not allowed. 5. The same basically goes for any country, since they all enlist only a tiny fraction of their population in the active military. And 6. The number of ISIS fighters is actually higher than that of the United States, when we make the only rational comparison, which is between the size of an army and the size of the population it was designed for. Thank you for watching, and God bless.